Welcome to episode 116 of OTD, your daily dose of soccer history by 17 Laws Guy. It's February 24, 1973. If you're looking at the football map, this is the edge of it. Auckland, New Zealand, Newmarket Park, one ground, 5 teams, and a tournament that, on paper, feels small, but in football history is anything but. Because today is the day Oceania finally crowns the continental champion, and with that, FIFA's confederation puzzle clicks into place. Europe has the Euros, South America has the Copa, Africa has AFCON, Asia has the Asian Cup, and CONCACAF has its championship. But Oceania? Well, Oceania has geography, distance, tiny populations, and huge oceans. And for decades, it has also had a problem. It exists in world football without quite belonging to world football. Until now. To understand why this matters, you have to rewind, not just to 1973, but to the moment the idea of Oceania as a football continent becomes real. A decade earlier, the football world is in Tokyo for the 1964 Olympic Games, and in the corridors, away from the medals and the ceremonies, a conversation happens that will change the Pacific game. The driving force is simple. Australia and New Zealand want a seat at the table, not just friendly tours, not just one-off qualifiers, a structure, a pathway, a confederation. Because Asia won't take them. Europe obviously won't. And if you're a football nation without a confederation, your football's orphan. You can play, but you don't fully belong. So a few men push the idea, administrators with a big stubborn belief that a continent can be built by paperwork, patience, and plane tickets. And in 1966, that idea becomes the Oceania Football Confederation. If you want to learn more about this, please go back and listen to episode 15, where I explored the formation of OFC. The early OFC is fragile. It has ambition, but limited money. It has massive travel costs. It has associations spread across thousands of miles of ocean. And it has one giant internal tension, Australia. Australia is powerful enough to dominate the region, and restless enough to not want the region. They want tougher competition. They want the Asian Cup. They want Japan, Korea, Iran. And they keep trying to break into Asia, because Australia can see what the Pacific can't yet provide, scale. So by the early 1970s, that tension snaps. Australia resigns from the OFC in 72, which brings us to the question you have to ask if you're telling the story of the first Oceania Nations Cup. Why wasn't Australia there in 1973? That's because they walked out the year before, still chasing the idea that their football future lay somewhere else. And in a strange twist, that absence becomes oxygen, because without Australia's shadow, the OFC can finally do something that gives the Confederation identity, run its own championship. So, February 1973. The tournament is staged in Auckland, all at Newmarket Park, a single-venue festival, compact and practical, and 5 teams arrive. New Zealand, the hosts. Tahiti, with flair and fearlessness. New Caledonia, hard and organized. Fiji, proud and physical. A New Hebrides, the name at the time for what would later become Vanuatu. This too tells you something about Oceania in the early 1970s. The region is still evolving politically. Some associations aren't even fully aligned with FIFA status in the way the rest of the world expects. But they play, and they belong here. The format is straightforward. A round robin. Everyone plays everyone. The top 2 go to the final. And right away, you can feel the difference between Oceania and the rest of the football world. In Europe, a continental championship is stadiums and sponsors and pressure. Here, it's a tournament that feels like a summit meeting, like a declaration, we exist. New Zealand start with a statement, a big win over Fiji, goals, rhythm, and that familiar sense that in this confederation, New Zealand are one of the natural heavyweights. Tahiti respond in kind, not with scale, but with style. New Caledonia grind out results, exactly as you'd expect from a team built to survive tournaments. And New Hebrides, they're not here to make up the numbers. They're here to announce that football in Pacific Islands is not a novelty. It's coming. But as the week unfolds, the tournament starts to narrow into its inevitable center, because the key match isn't the blowouts. It's the one that feels like a final before the final. New Zealand versus Tahiti. Hosts versus outsiders. Structure versus improvisation. The bigger football nations versus a team that plays like it has nothing to lose. The draw 1-1. And that draw matters. It's proof that Oceania's crown won't be decided by geography alone. So after the round robin dust settles, the table is clear. New Zealand and Tahiti, first and second, meet again, now with a trophy on the line. February 24, 1973, at Newmarket Park. And what makes this final special isn't just that it's the first. It's a strange weight of first in football. The first time you play for a title, you're not trying to win a match. You're trying to define what the title is. You're trying to give the trophy meaning. You're trying to create a tradition in real time. Tahiti arrived with belief. They've already shown they can live with the hosts. They've shown they can score. They've shown they can resist. New Zealand arrived with pressure, the pressure of hosting, and the pressure of being the country that, in Oceania, is expected to build the standard. And then the final begins, and it follows the oldest logic in tournament football. The team that manages the moment wins the history. New Zealand score first. Auckland breathes, and then they score again. And with that second goal, the match stops being a contest and becomes a ceremony. New Zealand 2, Tahiti 0. Oceania has its first continental champion. And if you want the image to hold on to, it's not just a trophy lift. It's this. A confederation that has spent years trying to justify its own existence finally produces the thing every confederation needs, its own champion, crowned on its own soil, in its own competition, under its own banner. So what? Because this is where the story expands beyond Auckland. The first truth is that the OFC Nations Cup will never have the easy life. It won't have Europe's money, or South America's mythology, or Africa's mass, or Asia's scale, or CONCACAF's commercial footprint. Oceania's tournament will always wrestle with the same forces: distance, funding, player pathways, club infrastructure, calendar conflicts, and the awkward fact that the Confederation's best teams have often needed to leave home to grow. But the tournament survives, sometimes irregularly, sometimes reinvented, sometimes used as a World Cup qualifying tool, sometimes ignored by the wide football world. And that struggle is the point, because Oceania's story is not dominance, it's persistence. The second truth is that the Nations Cup becomes a mirror for Oceania's internal balance of power. For a long time, the tournament is effectively a two-horse race, Australia and New Zealand. That dominance is a double-edged sword. On the positive side, it raises standards. It gives island nations benchmark matches. It attracts attention when the big two show up. On the negative side, it can flatten the competitive ecosystem, because when the same teams win again and again, belief becomes harder for everyone else to hold. And then the great tectonic shift happens. Australia leaves Oceania for Asia in 2006. From one angle, it's a loss. The Confederation's biggest market and biggest football brand is gone. From another angle, it's clarity, because the OFC becomes what it always was underneath, a Pacific Confederation anchored by New Zealand, with island nations fighting to build professional pathways in conditions unlike anywhere else in football. Which takes us to the third truth, the club side of the story. Because national teams are only one half of football's maturity, the other half is clubs, leagues, salaries, academies, travel budgets, stadiums, and coaches. Oceania's top club competition starts in the late 1980s and grows into what becomes the OFC Champions League, the route to the Club World Cup, where Oceania's champion often represents an entire region with a semi-professional squad. And in recent years, that gap between Oceania's football passion and Oceania's football economy has finally forced a new answer: a fully fledged OFC professional league, a competition built to create what Oceania has always lacked: a stable, high-level professional pathway inside the Confederation, not only as a trophy chase, but as an infrastructure project. So when you look back at 1973, it's tempting to see it as a footnote, a small tournament, a small field, one park in Auckland. But that's the wrong lens. The right lens is this. In 1973, Oceania didn't just crown a champion. It declared itself a continent in football terms. And it started a journey that, 50-plus years later, is still being built, league by league, tournament by tournament, and flight by flight. And as we close, let's land three things to take away from February 24, 1973. First, football isn't only played on grass, it's built in institutions. A confederation without a champion is an idea. A confederation with a champion becomes a reality. Second, geography shapes football more than tactics ever will. In Oceania, the ocean is always the opponent, and every tournament that finishes is a victory over distance. And third, the smallest continental championship can carry the biggest meaning, because for the nations of Oceania, this wasn't just silverware, it was belonging. On this day in 1973, New Zealand beat Tahiti 2-0 at Newmarket Park to win the first Oceania Nations Cup, and Oceania finally crowned a champion of its own. That's all for episode 116 of OTD, your daily dose of soccer history by a 17 Laws guy. If you enjoy OTD, please follow, rate, and share the show. It's the simplest way to help this project grow. And if you have a story, a correction, or rabbit hole you want me to chase, email me at otd@17lawsguy.com. Tomorrow, we go to Barcelona, to February 25, 1912, and to Paulino Alcantara, the teenage phenomenon, the early idol, and the question of where he truly sits in the pantheon of GOATs. See you then.